going live to YouTube. This meeting is being recorded and we are live on YouTube. Yay. Good morning, everyone, or good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another brand spanking new episode of Who Do You Think You Are? My name is Lasia Kahoot, and I am your host. And once again, as always, here is my co-host on the show and in life, Mr. Glenn Sheridan.
Hello, everyone.
And once again, we have a super special guest today that we are really looking forward to connecting with, to having a fantastic conscious conversation with. But before we jump any further, I would just like to take a moment to say thank you, thank you, thank you. We are coming to you from Saanich on Vancouver Island on the unceded lands of the Wasanich people. And we are so grateful to live, work, breathe, and play on these lands in this moment right here, right now. Thank you. So as we move forward with today's episode, I'm just going to read this bio, which I believe was crafted yesterday and is so fantastic that I'm just going to read it instead of trying to pick out little things, because there's so much goodness and wonderful stuff in here. So our guest today, I'm not going to read the first sentence because I want that to be part of his response. However, he's going to respond to our question. But our guest today, it says here, since 2013 has been studying and extracting wisdom, insight, and practices from various disciplines, both ancient and modern, in an attempt to answer the perennial big questions that have plagued human beings since the dawn of their existence. This individual plays many parts in his day-to-day life: husband, father, friend, podcaster, leader, trickster, I like that one, teacher and student, to name a few, and attempts to negotiate a dynamic balance between the many aspects of his life and being in an ongoing quest for inner and outer wholeness. Driven by curiosity, that's been a big word in the last few episodes of our podcast. Driven by curiosity, awe, and love, he works to map out the recurring themes and truths that emerge in the spiritual traditions of every age and culture, and share his findings either through his YouTube channel, The Outsider's Perspective, or in everyday conversations with friends, family, colleagues, and strangers alike. Kind of like what's going on here today. So I would also like to make a plug for this individual, because we met probably about a month, maybe about a month and a half ago, through a mutual friend. And we are part of a community that is being birthed that we're all very excited about, called the Center of Love. And our super special guest today is one of the founding members. And I know that with all of that has been shared so far, that is just a scratch of the surface, or just a smattering of who and what he truly is. So without further ado, Ollie, or Oliver Belisle, tell us, who do you think you are?
Wow, thank you for that. Thanks for the introduction. Yeah, like I said in the first sentence of the bio, which you conveniently left out, I don't actually know who I think I am. On any given day, it changes. It's a very layered question. I feel like there's a lot of answers that are partially true, but it's hard to capture the whole truth in a concise way. So as you said, it's kind of scratching the surface, but wow, where to start? I guess with logistics, right? On my podcast, I always ask people, the big question, who are you? And then people go on a 30-minute spiel, but they never say their name or anything like that. So I'll start with my name, Oliver, Oliver Belisle, Ollie to most people. But yeah, as to the essence or sort of, nugget of who I am, man, I actually don't know. I really don't. I think one of the answers that I can give you is that I'm a somebody who at one point in the not too distant past realized he was actually a nobody. And in realizing that, I became everybody. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, I thought I was this person. I thought I knew who I was. And then I had this experience that showed me that all of that stuff was just like, whew, like clouds in the sky, like a story. And it was just like, oh, wow, I'm not that. And then all of a sudden I had this feeling that I was like everybody, like not intellectually, but I felt it. I felt like, wow, like we're literally all one, like we're all the same, one being sharing many different bodies. And I had this experience, and I couldn't put it into words for many years. And for a while, I thought maybe I'd had some kind of like episode, I was like, should I be checking myself in? Like something strange just happened. Everything shifted around me, but nothing changed, Mm-hmm. And the world became different, even though nothing actually changed. Like I started noticing things that I had never noticed before, appreciating things I never even knew existed. And so I think that really is the start of my quest to discover who I am, or who I think I am. And so, yeah, that's probably the most concise answer I can give you. We can get into all kinds of speculative sort of, metaphysical. I am awareness. I am loving awareness. I am the universe. I am nature. Right. I had that realization not that long ago where it was like, oh, wait a second. Like, I'm not separate from the universe. I'm not separate from nature. I am nature, and you are nature. You're what nature's doing here and now. And so I had this very, again, embodied realization that, I'm just the tip of the iceberg. And I think I'm this separate, being named Oliver, but really I'm just the whole thing doing Oliver right now. And so again, like, I don't know, again, these were just words, right? I don't know how else to say it, but so I guess I think I am what the universe is doing at this point in time in this space here and now. But yeah, I don't know. Who do you think I am? Help me.
You know what? I love that. And as happens often, there is so much that we could end up focusing on, unpack there. But what you just said just a few seconds ago, I'm the whole thing doing Oliver right now. I think that was one of the coolest things that I sort of picked up on, because pretty much everything you said I agree with as well. And I haven't answered the question, who do you think you are? I'm the one who does the asking. And it's something I think about and contemplate all the time. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I've been immersed in spiritual and consciousness studies for the last several years, and I'm continuing to do so. But that's just my world. And it's sort of, once we went to, like, officially, it kind of happened when we walked into the Center for Spiritual Living Toronto about 6 years ago. And I heard the power talk, the little 5-minute sort of mini talk that was given by the spiritual practitioner of the day. And even from the opening meditation, before then, the meditation, and then the power talk, and then the talk, the official one, the 15-20 minute one given by the minister, it blew my mind, because all of a sudden, this idea that there was some external force that was controlling me or manipulating me or had plans for me, or that there was some, predestined trajectory that I was on, and I was just taking the steps that were already laid out before me, sort of thing. All of that went away in an instant when I heard what they were talking about there. And basically, that there's only one thing going on, that we are all that one thing in its entirety, the whole, doing Oliver right now, doing Lasia right now,
Mm-hmm.
doing Glenn right now, doing this conversation right now, the way it's being perceived by each of us right now. To the extent that we're aware that that's who and what we are. And for me, that was incredibly empowering. And I am so grateful to have had that awakening, I guess, in that moment. And there have been several more since then, because I believe we're constantly changing. Like, there's nothing static about life. There's nothing static about being. It's always changing. It's always, emerging. It's always unfolding, always evolving, always becoming the next bigger, and not next as in like, there's this laid out plan, but just like the next version of who and what we are. And to me, it's so exciting. And it's like, once you know that, how can you unknow it? So yeah, so all of this, and then the whole thing about, that you were somebody, realizing that you were or you thought you were somebody, realizing that you were a nobody, and then realizing that became everybody. That also, I think that is just an amazing, not even distinction, not even necessarily sort of an evolution, but just incredible unpacking of awareness, and sort of being nudged into those realizations by this wholeness that each and every one of us is. So I mean, when probably the most concise answer that people give in answering this question is, I don't know, or I don't have a clue, or I have no idea, right? Because you can keep rambling on and on and on and on to kind of qualify or rationalize or
Yeah.
justify or explain or whatever, because we have the language that we have the level of awareness that we're at. And it almost sort of feels like the more we try to explain or identify or put language or meaning or context to it, the more it's almost like, we can be like pushing even further to
Yes.
discover, like that wholeness, that infinitude, that profundity and creativity that we just are, period.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Words are interesting, right? I think language is magic. That's another thing that I've realized recently is that it's hypnotic. It's sleight of hand, right? We're like, oh, look at the word, look at the word, look at words, 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 words. But words are pointing to something, an experience, a reality that is beyond description. And so for me, a big part of my journey has been to realize that words are useful, conventional, but they're not real in the
Mm,
sense that what they point to, they're different from what they point to. The name is not the thing to which it refers. And we get so caught up in names, God, truth, all of these words. And it's like, well, what's the meaning behind the words?
yeah.
And that's really the important thing, right? The whole point of words, I think it's Shang Tzu who says nets are for catching fish. When you got the fish, forget the net, right?
Mm,
Well, words are for catching meaning. Once you've got the meaning, forget the words, right? It's not important anymore. The point of words is to be a vehicle for meaning. Once you've got the meaning, you don't need to, you can get out of the car. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, the more you talk about it, I feel, especially the more it gets complicated and intellectualized, the further away you get from the reality. And so there definitely is a danger with words and talking and talking. And like you and I have had similar experiences. When I say, whatever, you use my description of a somebody, nobody, everybody, you get it. It doesn't matter. The words might not resonate with you, but you understand the experience that I'm describing because you have a frame of reference for that. So I think it's really important that we distinguish between the concepts, the words, and the actual reality behind them, right?
mm. Yeah. Yeah. Honey Bunch, do you want to jump in? There's a
I,
lot of stuff here.
I just realized when we get asked this question, who do you think you are? I think the best way to answer it is to just sit there and say nothing for like
Yeah.
an hour and a half.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the truest answer we can probably produce, but doesn't make for good podcasting.
At least those people listening, people watching might see
Yeah,
some funny expressions, but
Yeah.
yeah.
it's like in this episode, we're going to meditate silently for an hour and a half on the question, "Who do you think you are?"
Done that yet? That's a possibility.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean, the other answer too is I think the Vedic sages said it quite well, right? You are that, or I am that.
Mhm.
What's that? That. You're it. That's it. The whole thing, the whole enchilada, right? Tat
yeah.
famazi. It's another concise way of saying it, but again, it leaves much to be desired in a podcast setting. So you kind of have to unpack it with more words, and then you kind of lose the essence of it. But it's the way it is, right? I mean, it's the paradox. It's like words are not the reality, but they lead you to the reality. They lead you to the
Mhm.
experience. If you follow the words, if you don't get lost in the words and get hung up on the particular words like Yahweh or Allah or this or that, it's like, yeah, these are all like signs pointing to a destination. Keep walking. Right. And then you won't have to talk anymore because you're going to feel it. You're going to know it in an embodied way, not in a intellectual way, which is, again, that's just the servant, right? It's supposed to be anyways.
Yeah. The when you said I'm nobody, I mean, it makes me think of the Ram Dass book. I Becoming Nobody, I think it's called. Um, Now, I love teachers like him, uh, but there's this thing of I have it's a little judgy on my part that um, a person who is let's say is not a father or not a mother, but has another way of mentoring where he sort of like casts that net wide and pulls in all these people to mentor and to teach and to be in community with. But I still think there's like, okay, but there's like you haven't you haven't your path took you down this road where you, like in his case, it was sort of the Timothy Leary drug thing in the '60s, and going off to India, and opening himself up to all these different modalities, and figuring it out, and like crashing and hitting bottom, and sex and drugs and whatever. But not being a parent, and this has come up for me this week, with this person I'm on, had a dialogue with on Twitter for a bit, who just recently become a father for the first time, and I just thought of this idea of parenthood as an archetype,
Mm-hmm.
like being a mother or being a father. Like you're entering into the realm of, oh, I'm an individual, and this is who I've been. I've learned, who I am, and these are my preferences. And then this thing comes along, and you get attached to it, where um, another part of consciousness, this new being, comes into your life and just blasts you with like, just, oh, you think you know who you are? Oh, okay. Let's put that to the testo, and just then that archetype is another thing, the parent child and whatever, and then you have siblings, of course, as well, potentially. But that, like, there's so many ways to look at it. But like, I know you're a father, and you've got lovely children. I've been in your home once, and a lovely family, and it's just like, I'm grateful that I chose the path that included that kind of archetype, where it also helps me to keep in check with, like, you know if I've been judgy about my parents, how
Mm.
they raised me,
Yeah, having
right?
kids will definitely fix
Yeah.
that. Holy.
And I just think, like, I love the simplicity of, somebody became a nobody, and now I'm everybody. That's beautiful. But you put, like, where do you put down the roots there? Where do you want to focus for a while,
Yeah, yeah. Well,
And
I think Lassia touched on it. I mean, it's dynamic. It never stops, right? So that wheel keeps turning. And
mhm.
I find myself fluctuating all the time between this somebody that I think I am, this nobody that's behind the somebody, and then everybody. I have these experiences all the time where I fall in and out of that sort of consciousness. It's my goal is to stay in it at all times, and that's why I do what I do, and that's why I read the books that I read and meditate and practice and do all the different things, right?
Yeah,
Because I want to stay in that universal kind of state where I am everybody, and then there is no judgment, because who am I judging? Right?
yeah,
I see somebody doing something I don't agree with. That's a mirror. That's a part of me. So what am I judging? Right? Judging myself, judging aspects of myself. Everybody's just mirroring back things that are part of me. So, but again, in my experience, again, you talk about Ramdas's guru seemed to be in that state all the time. Uh, I'm not there. It doesn't sound like Ramdas ever got there. And for most of us, I think the best we can hope for is to keep practicing diligently and try to spend as much time in that place as possible. But let me tell you, when you're parenting a 6-year old or an 8-year old or a 12-year old, being everybody or being nobody doesn't always work. Sometimes you got to descend to that level of father figure or authoritarian, or I got to play the role of I'm the father and I have to be that. And it's easy to get lost in those roles. So, I mean, that's to me, that's the challenge of daily practice, is always trying to become aware when you're in that at that level of consciousness where you become Oliver the father, and they're not listening to me and they made a mess, and trying
yeah,
to constantly pull out of there and go, okay, yes, that's true at one level, but at another level, big picture, these are your kids. They're just you, just like everybody else you meet. And getting mad is not going to help you, and it certainly isn't going to help them. I mean, sometimes
yeah,
it makes them listen better, but it's not the way that I want to be, and it certainly isn't the way that I want to be with my kids. So, it's the kids become teachers, and they're my best teachers. I think they're probably the last 3 people on this planet that can trigger me the way they do. I've had people in my life that used to trigger me, and now it's just all love. I have nothing but love for them, and they haven't changed, but it just goes through me. I don't get caught up in it anymore. But man, as soon as you get to the familial level with children and stuff, it's like they just know which buttons to push right away. So great teachers, amazing.
yeah. It Oh man, what was I going to say there? There's something, but the other part is the hilarious aspect of it, the role playing thing where you forget somehow your memory is wiped that you did exactly that thing that they are doing with you and to you and through you,
Yeah,
right?
or did it worse?
You were sassy, you were, pushing buttons like you said, all that stuff. You were playing innocent when, it's like, okay. Somehow you forgot it. And it's like later on when things cool down, your body probably the that memory that's in your body somewhere where you maybe felt ashamed of doing that as a kid, it may bubble to the surface and you go, oh right, yeah, I probably said that crap to my dad or whatever.
Yeah, well, if that happens to you, kudos. You're an amazing parent, because I think for most of us, those things don't bubble up. We just keep on driving forward, and like, I can't believe they did that. And it's like, so you have obviously a level of self reflection and self awareness that allows for that experience to bubble up.
Yeah.
And so kudos
I
to you.
wish. I wish.
Oh no, you got it. You got it. It's just like Lasia said, once the door's open, you can't close it. It's still open. It's the light of awareness is in you. And the fact that you realize these things after the fact is a sign of that, I think.
Well, I'd love to jump in here because if I may, because there are two things
Of
that,
course.
as you gents are talking that have come up for me. One is the buttons, and it's like the buttons, who installed the buttons? Like there are buttons, right? And like we're the
100%.
ones who are choosing to have them activated or not. Which leads me back to, what you sort of, have been talking about at parenting. And I mean, Glenn and I are parent to one human child together. Our daughter Milana, who is 17 going on 18, and will be moving back to Toronto in a couple of months to go to school there. And then Glenn has two other children who are much older. And so for me, I mean, the whole thing about sort of noticing and becoming aware of the dynamic, parent child, and being in the parental role, if you will, versus being in the child's role, earlier on in life. And what Glenn said of like, oh, sort of like, yeah, or even like that I now have, I guess respect is part of it, but compassion, for what my parents went through with me, what the kind of parenting that they did, with the best that they had, at their fingertips, in their awareness sort of thing at the time. And to know that, as I'm going through my things, as a parent, that those times where I'm not perhaps behaving as optimally as I would like,
Mm.
okay, who put that expectation on me? I am. And that it's not an either or situation. And that's the one huge thing that I've learned in the last few years, while in my studies, is that it's not, either you're this or you're that, either you're super aligned or you're, completely out of it. We're the whole all the time,
Yeah.
right? And the level of awareness may fluctuate, but the more, at least this has been my experience, the more I become aware and the more I am intentional, even during those times when I lose my shit for whatever reason, I'm aware that that's
Yes.
happening, right? And
Kudos.
it's like I'm not. It's the impatience might be there to, like, oh my God, I've been studying this for like this many years and whatever. And like, why am I not better at this kind of thing? But at the same time, I also know, like, at the
Mm.
same time, this is growth. This is expansion. This is stepping into, or out of my comfort zone into another level of being that I'm not familiar with. And stepping out of the comfort zone can be uncomfortable. Like that's part of it.
By
So
definition.
so yeah, so for me it's not, I just wanted to chime in and say it's not either or, that even in those times of being angry, of feeling hurt, of feeling wounded, of judging, of feeling put upon, whatever, that as we become more aware of how infinitely powerful and creative and resilient we are, that we can still hold compassion for ourselves, in those times, because sometimes that's the way we're unfolding. Anger is part of it, judgment is part of it. And to realize that we're not that anger, we're not that judgment. This is something that is happening, that we're going through, and that we get to blast and work through and come out not even on the other side necessarily, just bigger, better, stronger, different, and new, for lack of other words in this moment. For me, that's what's part of it. And parenting, oh my God, has been probably the most activational, teaching, immersive experience of everything that I have experienced in my life so far. And to have a daughter who we both believe chose us, and she will argue to her dying breath at this moment that that's not the way it happens. But to have a daughter who we truly believe chose us, I am so grateful that she was the one, and am just so grateful to have such a powerhouse and tour de force, for a child that continually challenges, and has done so from the moment she came out of the womb, has just been the greatest gift and blessing that I ever could have hoped and sort of expected for, because we also had a hand in creating this relationship that we have with our daughter, and her energy coming into our familial sort of archetype, for lack of a better word. So I wanted to the buttons and the yes and this and kind of thing, and not either or.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't serve us to beat ourselves up when we slip or slip. It doesn't even necessarily benefit us to consider slips as slips, like you said. It's more like an experience, and you either learn from it or you keep repeating it. And that's the issue, right? And so for me, who do I think I am? Let me tell you a little bit about me. My drug of choice historically has been anger. Ever since I was a little kid, I realized recently, actually with Cressa's help, we were having a conversation about anger, because like for a while, my view on anger is that it had no practical value, no purpose. People would say to me like, oh, it's a good motivator. And I'd be like, yeah, but there's better motivators. Like I can be motivated, for example, by anger at the fact that police injustice unfairly targets people of a certain background, ethnic background. I can be angry about that, and that can cause me to go out and protest and or I could be motivated by love and compassion for the people who are being the victims of injustice, and I can go out there and that can motivate me. So to me, it's like anger is hardly ever, if ever, a functional, positive, productive force. There's always better. But what I realized is, and what Cressa helped me realize, is that there's actually something worse than anger, and that's depression. And sometimes anger can pull you out of that depression. And then it clicked for me. I was like, that's why I never have been depressed my entire life. As a kid growing up, I never felt depressed, because why? I was always angry. And it was like keeping me out of that depression zone. So, it's one step up from depression maybe, right? But all that to say that anger was my steadfast companion. And not only I had a bad temper, not only did I have anger issues, I took pride in my anger issues. I thought they were a strength. I was like, yeah, somebody messes with me, fuck it, I'll just lose it. Let's fight. Right? Crazy, right? Just losing my mind. And I thought that was a good thing until I started on this path. And then I started to shift. And so for me, like, I guess, you're saying buttons, there are buttons, right? And we get to choose. That's been one of the biggest realizations in my life coming through this, is that, I get to choose my reactions. Not 100% of the time. It takes practice. It's not like I can just choose any time. But if I work on this stuff diligently, then all of a sudden, things that used to trigger me won't trigger me anymore, because it's not actually the things that trigger you. It's your beliefs around the thing. It's your opinions about the thing. This shouldn't happen to me. My expectations around the thing. How dare they say that to me? I'm this person and blah, blah, blah. And you get all defensive, get your back up. No, I'm nobody. So now those things don't trigger me anymore. But the same behavior, right? The behavior hasn't changed. It's just all of a sudden now I don't react to it the same way, because like you said, I've managed those buttons, or I've reconfigured them a little bit so that they don't get pushed. But we definitely have a say in it. I think you're right. It's not always easy to choose your reaction. Certainly sometimes when you, especially with like when you get caught by surprise, which is what my kids do, because like with adults, it's like I have a pretty good sense of like interactions and what people are going to do. But kids are so good at just coming out of left field with the craziest, most ridiculous thing. It's like, what motivated you to do this? Or like, did you think about this before you did it? No, I just did it. Oh, okay. Yeah. So they're good at catching you off guard. And that's when the triggers get triggered, right? That's when the buttons get pushed. When you are going into an interaction with someone and you're like, I know this person has been difficult in the past. I know that I've been triggered by them in the past. And you go in mindfully, consciously in presence, then it's easy to choose your reactions, right? But when you're just getting up in the morning and you step on a Lego and then you go into the bathroom and it's like there's a bunch of makeup everywhere, it's like, wow, that's when the buttons get pushed because you don't have that presence and you're not ready for it, right? You can't prep yourself for the things that you don't know are going to happen. So I think that's the next level of the practice where you're like, okay, even the stuff that surprises me doesn't trigger me anymore, but not quite there yet. Working on it.
Well, and so, okay. So all of that I think is so neat. And it just reminds me of stuff that we're talking about in my Eat Well, Be Well program right now that I'm running for 4 weeks. And part of that program is a daily recorded message. And because there is so much stuff that I could talk about when it comes to nourishment of mind, body, and soul, I have chosen to anchor myself in the alphabet. So day 1 is awareness, day 2, the letter B, the letter C, and so on and so forth. And so day 4 is design. And so for me, my understanding at this point, because of the way that the law of cause and effect works, whether you want to look at it from a spiritual perspective or a scientific perspective, is that it's always in play, whether you are choosing actively with awareness, by design or not. And so for me, we're always choosing whether we're aware of it or not. And so when you were sort of just talking about, that's the next level of awareness, for me, that's what it comes down to is, are you responding with awareness mindfully, or are you just kind of like going with the flow sort of thing as things are unraveling and you're stepping on the Lego and running into the makeup in the bathroom and all that kind of stuff. And for me, that's just, it's growth, it's expansion, it's up-levelment, which I think can only happen as we begin to notice more, as we begin to become more aware. And so I would disagree with you slightly there and say that we are always choosing, just sometimes we're not doing it consciously. That we're just reacting rather than even responding. Yep. So for me, that was another thing that, when I sort of discovered that, it was like, okay, so again, it's just, I'm the whole all the time. It's just how aware am I that that's what's happening? And when I do get angry, when I'm judging, when I'm whatever, that gap between I am the whole versus I'm just, going through life by rote sort of thing, that gap gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, which I so value and so appreciate, because it just feels better to be in the flow. And even when feeling angry or judging, knowing that that's what I'm doing, knowing that that's how I'm behaving. But again, that's not who I am. So just narrows that gap so that I can get out of that judgment or anger that much more quickly and back into what actually feels good and grounding and solid and whole and expansive versus constrictive and just temper tantrumy.
Yeah. And I was going to actually ask you about that because the way you describe it is pretty spot on in my experience as well, where it's like you're going through it. Let's say it's anger, but it's almost like there's a part of you that's not involved in it, that's standing aside from the anger and that isn't touched by it. And when you can maintain a part of yourself in that way, that's kind of detached from it and almost like observing it. Like sometimes I'll like be in the middle of like, ruminating or upset about something. And that little part of me that's standing aside will be like, it's okay, buddy. I'll almost get like a little voice. And then, so that helps you pull out of it way faster. Like I would, in the past, I would be upset. My wife and I would get into a fight or something. We wouldn't talk for 3 days. Right now, it's like we have like a tiny bit of static and I get my back up for like 15 seconds. And then that part of me that isn't involved takes back control and goes, okay, now let's go talk it out and everything's fine. Right. So it's like, instead of a 3-day blowout fight, it's like a 15-second, like it's not even a fight. The kids don't even know that anything happened, but I know. And that part of me just kind of stays out of it. So yeah, it's when you get completely swept into it and completely lose yourself in it that I feel like it's more destructive. And then you have more cleanup to do after. And it's like, oh man, like, shouldn't have said that, shouldn't have done this. And that was my life for 30 years or 20, 25, 28 years was, basically cleaning up messes that I created out of anger, out of spite, out of arrogance. And these are all, in my experience, defense mechanisms, right? They're all just ways for me to cope with my insecurities, ways for me to avoid feeling my sad feelings and those types of things. It's like, yeah, you start to feel cold and sad, just start a fire. Anger is that fire. Just burn the whole thing down, but at least you're warm. And so, yeah, that shift away from that has been big. And for me, yeah, I don't think we disagree actually in terms of the choice. I think you're right. We always have a choice, but when you're not aware that you have a choice, it's like there is no choice. You know what I mean? And so that really does come back to the awareness of the choice, because for my whole life, I could have chosen my reactions. I didn't know that was a choice. So I just reacted, like you said, according to my established conditioned patterns of behavior, my default. And then something happened that made me realize, like, oh, it's like there's all these other side roads that I could take. I don't have to keep going down this path. Every time this happens, I don't have to react this way. And so that awareness, like you said, as it grows, you realize, oh, you have options. Like when I step on the Lego, I can actually laugh because it is funny. If I look at it a certain way, it's like the archetypal parent experience, stepping on Lego, waking up with Lego in your bed. Like that's hilarious. There's like, comedy sketches about that on TV shows and stuff. So it's like, now I have the choice. And when I'm aware of it, I make the choice that's more optimal. But sometimes if you don't know there's a choice there for you, and which was the case for me for most of my life, it's hard for you to take that road if you don't know it's there. And you're just always going down the same ruts, the same ruts in the road. So, but yeah, that was a big realization for me. The fact that you are in charge of your own inner experience. Like you said, the buttons, the triggers, all of that stuff is in you. And you think like, well, of course I got angry. This person cut me off in traffic. It's not like that's an objective like that's not the only reaction to getting cut off in traffic. There's people that get cut off in traffic and don't care. So it's like, why are you choosing to react in anger? Oh, I am choosing. Okay. Whoa. Right. It's a bit of a mind bender, if you will.
Yeah.
But yeah, so how did you cultivate or start to cultivate that awareness? Basically from when you walked into that Center for Spiritual Living in Toronto, that was your awakening experience when you started to realize? Or
for me, I mean, okay, so this is really interesting because excuse me, when you said anger was my drug of choice, I've never looked at anger in that way before for me. And I had a lot of anger. I was a very angry person for a long time. And there's a whole, like my book, there's a lot of my book that's coming out in July that is, that speaks to what that anger was, where it came from, and just how it manifested. And so for me, for so much of my life, that was my normal. It wasn't even sort of that it felt like a drug of choice. It was just like, isn't everybody this way? And so, I understand now. It took a long time to get there, and a lot of counseling and various therapies and getting off drugs and alcohol and becoming clear and present to deal with, why the anger was there in the first place. And then to learn that anger wasn't who I am, that, the shame that I was experiencing and the brokenness that I felt that could infect anyone who got too close to me, that wasn't who I am. But it only kind of got me so far. And then it wasn't until we went to the Center for Spiritual Living and were introduced to the Science of Mind philosophy, which really is just, it's one philosophy that says the same thing that so many different philosophies and religions and new thought teachers, maybe even new age teachers, ancient mystics are saying. But the idea that, I am the one creating my reality. Nobody else. I am. I may agree with people, like the three of us are, experiencing an agreed upon reality, but we're all perceiving it slightly differently. But that I get to choose. And it's not, it's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. And
Good, well said.
Like the whether you call it the comfort zone or the wall or the protective layer or veneer or ego or whatever it is that you sort of want to call the thing that you have put around you to sort of protect you so that you don't get hurt. Once you begin to sort of claw your way out of that, to kick your way out of that, screaming and kicking and whatever sort of thing, to be able to open yourself up to more than that, it can be extremely painful, and it can be like for so many reasons. And for me, a lot of that pain was, like it was physical pain, it was emotional pain, it was mental pain, because I was being stretched, I was being pulled, I was being shaped into something completely different from what I had been used to for decades.
Yeah.
And so my brain would hurt, my body would hurt, and I would, the more I would learn, the more impatient I would become to like, okay, I get it already. I get it intellectually. Like, let's just have it happen already. And then, even now, like, sort of 6 official years in, never mind all the reading and listening and stuff that I had done before, but 6 official years in, it's an ongoing process. It's a creative process, and it is practice. It is a practice, and it's, the verb practice, reading, meditating, prayer, engaging with people in conversations like this, being challenged by our kid, by people in my life that I just don't vibrate at the same frequency as, that I don't resonate with, and endeavoring to, continue to see the light and compassion and kindness in them, knowing that whatever their behavior is, whatever it is that's being triggered in me, whatever it is that's bugging me about them, that's not who they are. That's not what I am. But then to also realize that sometimes I want to put my energy and attention on something else, not just trying to like really find the light and love and kindness in someone that's driving me crazy. So, my teacher would say to treat for the highest and furthest, to like know the best and highest for them and everyone in their orb from a distance, that we don't have to get along with everyone in our life. We don't have to be best friends with everyone. But it's ongoing. And anger has been so interesting for me because it's taken a long time. And I mean, Glenn is probably the person in my life who's been around me the longest, aside from, say, my mom, even my sister, who's seen the transition and the transformation. And there was a time where I felt so horrible, just so guilty, so mortified at the way that I behaved, at the way that I treated people, at the things that I did and said, because I didn't know any better. But now it's like, there's I guess there's forgiveness that has taken place. There's understanding and knowing that everyone is on their journey, that everyone, has their journey to take. And, that journey unfolds as they create that journey for themselves, one step, one moment at a time. And that, if we allow ourselves, we can learn, we can grow, we can evolve, we can become, we're always becoming, but we can become, by being aware, more aware of who we are. And so I don't know, this is another one of those sort of like, I could go on and on and on sort of rambling on about this, because it's just kind of comes back to, who do I think I am? Who am I really? And how do I want to show up in life? And anger is not as big a part of my life anymore. But that being said, like, it's an interesting thing because I tend to be someone who will, unleash and then it's done, right? Like
Yeah.
I want to get it out. I don't want it to fester. I don't want it to
No.
brew. I don't want to steep, whatever. I just
Yeah.
want to get it out so I can move on.
Yeah.
Glenn is different, and he's also he's very empathic, I guess, and he's like a sponge. And so, for him, he has a different experience when I unleash,
Of course.
where I'm just like letting out all of this energy, which may or may not be directed, at him,
He
but
still
he's
feels it.
around and he
Yeah.
absorbs it,
Of
right?
course. Yeah. Yeah. I've
So
I've got a similar parallel situation with my wife. She'll be like, I didn't even say anything. I'll be like, why? You were really angry or whatever. I didn't even say anything. You didn't have to. Felt it. The whole household felt it. There was a
yeah,
chill in the air. Yeah. So that empathy and even I don't consider myself to be particularly empathic. And people always talk about energies and vibrations, and I don't usually pick up on those things. I look at behaviors. I listen to words. I look at
yeah,
behaviors, and I look for incongruence. Like if you say one thing but you do another, that's like check. I'm going to
yeah,
remember that, and I'm building up a profile. Whether I want to or not. And
yeah,
it's less about judgment. It's more about observation, right? And just looking at like, okay, what's this person saying? What's this person doing? And that's what I pick up on. But even without being empathetic in the sense of like taking on people's energies and sensing their auras and all this stuff, like, dude, I can still feel Candace's energy when when she's angry, like it affects me, right? And so
yeah.
yeah, somebody who's like Glenn, who's more receptive to energies and stuff like that, you could be angry about something totally unrelated, but I can imagine he'll feel it. And what did I do? That's always my first question. Did I do something, Candace?
And like it's interesting, and I'll just, because Glenn might want to chime in here, but this takes me back to it was probably a conversation with my aunt, but it's about Alice Miller, who is, oh, I have three of her books which are in another room right now, so I can't even pull one of them out, but she's either a psychiatrist or psychologist, wrote these books decades ago, and the anger is a running theme in some of them. And one of the things that she says about anger is that when it comes to kids, like, there can be, more than one child in a family, and they respond and behave very differently like in terms of trauma.
Yeah.
And the kid that is angry and lashing out all the time is generally the one that you don't need to worry about as much as the one who is quiet
Internalizing,
and
bottling it up.
internalizes
Yeah,
everything, because
sure.
you don't know what's happening with them.
Yeah.
And so, in my family, I was the one who was vocal and lashed out and would fight back and challenge and whatever, even though I was scared shitless. And my sister was more of, the one who would withdraw and be more quiet and whatever. And so we've each had our own, journeys and experiences.
Struggles. Yeah. Yeah.
And whatever. But I mean, Honey Bunch, do you want to add anything? Because it's not even me. I just realized as I was talking, there's also Milana, and Milana and I have very similar temperaments. Even though there are a lot of, similarities between her and Glenn too. But when it comes to just unleashing, Milana and I both tend to do that way more than Glenn would.
Glenn's just as soon as he feels the energy, he just goes in the living room.
Retreat.
Okay, let me drag, because I can't just layer in where you guys are talking, but I'll drag it back to what you said very, very early on, Oliver, about the "thou art that" thing, because I think, stepping back, what we're talking about is this idea that we talk in these ways about reacting to. When this happens, I go to anger, I go to me, I would be like shutting down. And I'm learning a little bit more about polyvagal theory and trying to figure out what my body's doing and my body consciousness is doing to react, and how to manage and maintain and reflect and all that. But it's just like, at any opportunity, I'd like to remind people that what we're going through is just us, right? It's just, this is our vibration. This is where, like, when we get up in the morning and something like bang your shin on the table, or you with the Lego, or, it's like you were there, you were in that feeling of like what the hell, why did that happen to me, that kind of thing. You were there before you got out of bed.
Mm.
Your consciousness was there. You were emanating on that frequency, right? Or projecting, broadcasting on that frequency. So whatever's going on, I don't have a good analogy, but like whatever's happening is like a weather vane for the
Mm.
winds of my own consciousness. It's a needle, like an instrument needle. It's just showing where things are. It's a reading. It's
Yeah.
a, you know, and but you can't just talk like that. Like it's like, but the thing happened, so we'll talk about the thing, or the guy, or she did this, or, you know, why was he such an asshole? Like, how could he not see he was being that awful,
Yeah.
Um, so because we have to communicate, we have to go to the marketplace and like barter and
Yeah.
haggle and um. So anyway, I'll bring it back to because we've been talking about anger. So I've never read a whole like a Brene Brown book, but I did stumble across this book in Bolin Books, and I got it from the library a couple of times. Listened to it on audiobook. So it's called Atlas of
Oh,
the Heart,
yeah.
Brene Brown, and essentially what it is, mapping meaningful connection in the language of human experience. The thinking is that you ask a bunch of psychologists and sociologists like what emotions are there, and they can go off and make their list and come back, and they never make the same list as the other people who are told to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And most human beings, when they ask what are the emotions that you we experience, and it's basically happy, sad, angry.
Mm.
So she's done this list of, I think it's 87. What she, sometimes it strays into like, is that really an emotion?
Mm.
But it's worth talking about in that framework because it helps open things up, right?
Right.
The genius of it is that the way she has broken it down into categories, um, it's under the heading of places we go when,
Mm.
and then it's for the first one, places where we go when things are uncertain or too much. So, for me, that that would be like overwhelm, um, and maybe anxiety, right? So it's
Mhm.
stress, overwhelm, anxiety, worry, avoidance, excitement, dread, fear, vulnerability, right? So
Mhm.
there's a huge chunk of words to explore. The ones that are under anger are places we go when we feel wronged. So that
Mhm.
includes disgust, contempt, anger, dehumanization, hate, and self righteousness, right?
Mhm.
And you've got this. It's a good way to sort of narrow down into like a little bit of like I can understand this in bite-sized pieces.
Yeah.
Another good one is when life is good. Then you have all the good stuff like gratitude, joy, happiness, calm, relief, um, tranquility, and it's like it's just it's a good kind of um, I guess it's a practice tool or whatever. But like I really enjoy her, and at the end she has like little cartoon. She has illustrators sort of do little cartoon, um, terrible conversations that people have in offices where people are being like disrespectful or not really hearing each other, and
Yeah.
then she'll like redo the thing of like, well, this is probably a better way to
Right.
unfold that conversation, right? But
Interesting.
yeah, it's a really valuable thing, and I just thought like that's also another, and maybe another way to look at it is like, um, what you call anger, like first of all, it's not what other people call anger. It,
Well, what you listed under the umbrella of anger, self righteousness, disgust,
Mhm.
dehumanization, all that stuff, it's like, yep, check, check, check. Like, yeah. So anger is kind of an umbrella term, and you can get more refined about what kind of anger, or like, whether it's
Yeah.
self-righteous or it's whatever. But yeah, no, for sure. I agree. It's very, all this stuff is subjective, and it's based on
Mhm.
personal experience, and how those experiences map out to other people's experiences is like, the only way we can know is by making these mouth sounds that we're making right now and trying to gain an
Yeah.
understanding, right? But yeah, it's very subjective, and it sounds like what you're describing there is a model or a framework, right? Like Brene Brown in this book, she creates a very useful framework or model for how to navigate your own inner states of being, your emotional states, and so on and so forth. And again, like words, models are extremely useful, right? Because they
Yeah.
represent things that are too big, too complex for us to really capture. But when we create a model, it allows us to conceptualize it and interact with it in a different way. And I've found many useful models. For example, the cognitive behavioral therapy or Stoic philosophy model of thinking, feeling, doing. Every thought has an accompanying emotion and behavior, and you can't separate them. Like, a thought in that framework doesn't exist. Every thought also has an accompanying emotion and behavior. And understanding that and seeing the relationship between what you think and how that affects what you feel, and how you feel affects what you do, and then what you do also affects how you think and feel. It's like this wheel that goes in every direction, and every element affects every other element of the triad. And so when you get that understanding, it again helps you navigate your life, helps you see those choices, Lasia, as you were talking about earlier, because it's like, well, once I feel something, like you were saying, when you get anger, you just get it out, right? Which is great. I mean, you don't want to bottle it up and let it fester. But what the Stoics and what the cognitive behavioral therapy school of thought tells you is that you can cut anger out before it even arises.
Mm.
If you understand the roots of anger, if you understand that emotions are rooted in opinions and thoughts more than in the reality that's out there, and you start to get a handle on the thoughts, then anger doesn't arise anymore, or it arises very infrequently compared to before, because now you're getting at the root of it. Once it's there, the worst thing you can do is bottle it up and try to stuff it down. You have to express it. You have to work through it. You have to. But the whole point is, it doesn't have to be there most of the time in
Yeah.
the first place. And so for me, that was the big, and this guy right here, after I had my cubicle epiphany and I experienced myself as everybody and realized all these things that I couldn't put into words. That was the first book I read, was the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. And this comes from a long line of Stoic philosophy. He learned from a guy named Epictetus, and Epictetus said, we don't react to things, we react to our opinions about things. And the opinion that you have about things is in your control. You choose your opinions. It's one of the few things you can choose. So for me, that was a framework that was extremely useful to navigating my emotional being, right? Because it's like, it's not just like the weather just happens and you have no say in it. There's actually an origin to emotions. And if you get to that origin, if you look at your thoughts and beliefs and expectations and you manage those intelligently, then your emotional states are going to be a lot more even keeled, and you're not going to be angry all the time or sad, or you're going to be a lot more stable, I guess is the word that I would use. Equanimity, right? But yeah, so again, there's all these useful frameworks, and they all have value. None of them are 100% true, because they're models, and the
Mhm.
model is obviously never going to be true exactly to the thing that it's being modeled. But yeah, and it sounds like that the model that you're describing there through Brene Brown's work is pretty interesting. I'd like to get into that.
Yeah, and it's what you just said there. It's a reminder about, I don't know who said it first, but like, don't believe everything you think. You know, it,
100%.
it's like,
100%, because your thoughts are not your own,
yeah, just
right?
select and go from there. And I guess the way this map making thing, it's like an atlas. It's an atlas of emotions.
Yeah.
The person who came up with the idea, who's a guy who actually makes maps, is a cartographer, Dr. Kirk Goldsberry. So he basically helped her uh, focus this into this, like, well, when you have a map, what is it you're doing? It's like
Mhm.
you're asking these questions: where am I? How did I get here from there?
Yeah.
And how do I get there from here?
Yeah.
Where do I want to be?
Yeah.
So,
Orientation, navigation. Absolutely. Yeah.
so I guess
That's a really useful. Yeah.
we all use like versions of that, that map thing. But of course, then there's the cheat codes and the like. Oh, don't worry, I got this. I've been here before. I know how to do this. Like,
Yeah. Do you need the map if it's your neighborhood? You don't need a
yeah,
map, or you don't use Google Maps to drive around your neighborhood. You're familiar with it. It's familiar ground. But for most of us, that inner
right.
territory, that inner world, we do need maps. And that's what all these books and spiritual texts and
Mm-hmm.
philosophical texts, they're maps to this inner world that most of us have never set foot in. And Lacia, you were saying, your experience, it was like painful and jarring because you were being stretched in ways that had never happened before. If you use the territory analogy, it's like you were in this unfamiliar place and you were lost and you had no idea, right, what was going on. But luckily for you, you obviously had people guiding you, or the church that you were going to and stuff. But yeah, for a lot of people, they have these experiences, these awakening experiences or these epiphanies, and then they don't know what happened, and they have no map, and they have no way of making sense of it. And so I think that's why these types of conversations being public is really valuable and important, because somebody might stumble onto it and say, oh wow, I'm not going crazy, other people have gone through this, and there's frameworks that exist that can help me navigate these new experiences.
You guys are talking about the map and frameworks and models and stuff, and so many things have come to mind. And I'm reading one book and just finished listening to one, and I'm listening to another, and so I'm like, which book did I hear this out of?
Doesn't
And
matter.
I think it's one of the two that I don't have right here, and it's an author I'm not familiar with. I'm going to have to find it later. But anyway, but as far as maps go, I think it was something basically as simple as the map is not the terrain.
Correct.
So it just, goes back to sort of like the words aren't the thing. They
The
are
menu.
representations. They are, like a way to navigate,
Yeah.
maybe to, like maybe start to give some kind of context. But even, Honey Bunch, when you were talking about the Brene Brown, and I haven't read the book yet, like Glenn has showed me a few excerpts out of it, and it sits, on our dining room table or something like that. But I haven't read it the way that he has. What I'm curious about is, because I love organizing and compartmentalizing and putting things in diagrams and stuff like that. And so I was really interested when you just started to read out of those two sections of, places we go when, and places we go when we feel, or sorry, I forget what the first one was, but the places when we go feel wrong. But the one before that, where you were talking about overwhelm, anxiety, and stuff like that, for me, that was right now, because of everything I have going on, check. And to be aware that, this is how life could play out. And so I'm wondering, okay, so are there suggestions in that book? And I think you touched on that, Honey Bunch, by saying that at the end of the book, that there are these cartoons of, here's how a situation could play out. Here's a different way to, reframe coming from this perspective. Because when you read about the good stuff and gratitude was in there, that took me back to the conversation that we had on the couch years ago, just after Nick had committed suicide, and I was completely losing it. I was bawling. I'd had enough. We were going through so much stuff after we just moved here from Toronto. Like we'd been here for 2 months or something maybe. And it felt like so much was going wrong. And that this dream that we had sort of worked towards, this vision that we had, created for ourselves and, work towards, it was just like unraveling, before our eyes, through our fingertips, all that kind of stuff. And it ached, and I was so tired of it, and I was screaming and ranting and raving and crying and whatever. And I've talked about this before in previous episodes, and Glenn, to his credit, did not try to fix anything or solve anything or whatever, just, sat beside me as I just, cried and sobbed, really. And then when I calmed down enough, just said, love, what are you grateful for?
Mm.
And, the first initial response was likely nothing. And, it's like, what are you grateful for? And so to me, the gratitude in that moment, what ended up happening was something probably like, for the snot running down my face, the tears, whatever. What else? And the prompt to just find something to be grateful for to raise the vibration, just a little bit, to come out of that, depression, anger, grief, sadness, what that muck, that swirling miasma of all of those sort of negative seeming emotions. Gratitude was the tool. And so for me, when I'm really curious now to look at this book, because of loving the organizing things, but also to see, so what is it that we can do, when we are aware this is what's happening, that this is how we're behaving, that this is what's coming up for us. Great. Now what's the next step, so that we don't have to keep repeating this cycle and be in this loop, again and again and again. So that was the first thing that came to mind. And the other one is because one of the books I'm reading is The Energy Codes by Dr. Sue Morter, that I came across this fantastic chart or model, which I find absolutely fascinating. And so I haven't even had a chance to look into it like super thoroughly, but it's in a section where she's talking about the chakras. And so she lists what they are. And for me, like I've been aware of chakras, haven't really learned a lot about them. But they've been, hovering around sort of thing, and various meditations come up in conversation. And so this was the first time, as I'm looking at the chart, that, it goes from chakra 1 to number 7, and that each of them is associated with a musical note. And I'm like, oh my God. So now I know that there are 7 of them, okay. And then talks about the body areas affected, which I think is so fantastic. So I'm like, oh, that's me kind of thing. Yeah. She calls the backside symptoms, which I guess would sort of be like the negative seeming symptoms as they manifest. So again, you can like look on your chart and go check. Yep. See where it is that you need to sort of start to focus. And then what the front side characteristics, or like once you start to reframe and address and attend and heal, what that can, start to look like, how to practice to getting there, the breath work that's involved, which I'm so excited about because in the Eat Well, Be Well program that I'm doing right now, one of the weeks is on breath work. So like, hey, here's a whole nother, element that I can incorporate. Yeah. And then specific yoga poses for greater integration. And I have just gotten back into the hot yoga studio after 2 years of not being able to be in a hot yoga studio. And so to me, this is a very comprehensive, sort of framework, if you will, because it starts off with like, here's the chakra, which, associating it with a musical note and bringing music into it is fantastic for me. Gives you, the color, the note, the elements. So like different things that you can resonate with that will draw you in. And then what in your body, what if you're experiencing an achy knee, if you are getting migraines all the time, if, you have digestive issues, you can find yourself, there and realize, oh, that's connected with this chakra. And then what else energetically or emotionally might be coming up? Oh, now it's really starting to make sense. And then it's like, oh, but if I address it and attend to it, then this is what I can feel like. And then the tools to get there.
Right.
I love this, and I'm so curious to investigate this more. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So I just wanted to, bring that up because that was something that came into my purview the other day.
Plug the book. Yeah.
Yep.
There are so many different ways to map it out, right? Like my sister-in-law is a tarot reader, astrologer. And, that's another framework that I've come to learn about and appreciate more in the last few years, stripping it of its sort of, I don't know how to call it, like, stripping it of its like supernatural elements and really just seeing it as like, listen, there are these archetypes, right? That are psychological. They're as old as, as storytelling, basically, right? And they can map out into the stars, they can map out into myths, but really they're all elements of our psyches, right? There's all these different archetypes, and tarot is just like, as soon as I started looking into tarot with my knowledge of like, my studies of Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung and archetypes and the hero's journey and all that stuff, it's like, oh, the major arcana is the hero's journey. The fool starts, he's about to walk off a cliff, has no idea he's about to plunge into adventure. And then every card just takes you on his adventure all the way through to the end, which is the world where you become one with everything. Mm-hmm. And it's like, wow, that's it. Like, so it's like, I had this impression of tarot as like, oh, it's like people think it's magic and they're predicting the future and stuff. No, no, no. These are, again, maps of being. These are
Mhm.
just different ways to map out all of these inner dimensions. You can look at it through archetypes. You can look at it through astrological symbols, which are, again, just archetypes, right? Projected onto the sky. Like there's all these different ways to map it out. The chakra system in China, they have different energy point systems and meridians. And it's like we're all taught, it's just different ways of mapping out the same territory. But every model brings a little something different, a little nuance, a little insight. And so for me, it's like, you know, I had one person ask me, like, don't you get tired of just like reading the same stuff over and over again? It's like, no, because it's like, for example, I read the Tao Te Ching every year. I read this book, and every year I'm bewildered. I'm like, I don't remember reading this last year. How did I miss this? My mind is blown. I have this like complete blowout experience where it's like, it's been here this whole time. I've read it, I don't know, 20 times. The first time I've read it, it feels like the first time now because it's
Yeah.
like all this new stuff is coming up. So, but you know, then you read this other book like my wife really likes The Untethered Soul by
Yeah.
Michael Singer. I
Yeah.
read half of it and I was like, yeah, this is it. I don't have to, you know, again, like it's great, but this is it. Like I've read this book in different forms like hundreds of times, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you just feel it, you know it. Once you've had the experience and you hear someone talking about it or you read a book, it's like, yes, this is it. I don't have, like, I know it's saying the same thing in different language, right? And so yeah, whether it's chakras or archetypes or, you know, whatever, it's like if it helps you to navigate your life, find your center, and express yourself the way that you want to express yourself, the way that you feel is your highest expression, then rock on. Rock on, baby, bring it in. It's just tools in the toolkit. It's
Yeah.
like, you know, you might be you might prefer to use a drill, I might prefer to use a hammer. As long as we're building the same house and it gets done, it really doesn't matter. They're all tools for accomplishing a shared goal, if you will. So yeah, I
Yeah.
find it fascinating learning about all these different systems because it's like you can map them out like from one system to the other. It's like, okay, so like the you know, chakras map out to this in this system and map out to this, and it's like, you know, it's literally all the same. It's crazy to me that we're all just kicking around the same story in different ways. Like it's crazy.
I was driving myself nuts about a month ago. I had this realization that that maybe it's not. I'm not the first person to think this. Probably not, right? But that breathing is the seasons, because it's not just in and out. It's breathe in and hold, breathe out and hold. There's always a period where you're not breathing out or in, and there's you know what I mean, on both
Yeah.
ends.
Yeah.
But then I was driving myself like, which one's which then? If I decide to assign the breathing out as winter, and after that it's spring, or like I need to make a good case for, well, why is the out breath and pause, why is that spring? Why is it not? Because is it like just about to breathe in, like when you're going to fill your lungs again? Why isn't that spring? Like when
Mm.
you actually fill your lungs, why is that? Why is that summer? You know. So anyway, it was just like I was just going round and round. Okay, no, no, I can't do it. I got to think about this. You know.
It can go either way.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
You know,
interesting.
interestingly enough, Honey Bunch, I don't know if you remember, but in the book Breath by James Nestor, he has all of the
I haven't read it.
exercises that he, you haven't read it.
No.
I thought you did read it. You're the one who told
Well,
me about it.
I told you about hearing him on Joe Rogan, but I hadn't
Oh,
read
you
it.
never read the book. Oh,
I just breathe.
all right.
I just
So,
breathe. Yeah.
interestingly enough, this is rare that I have read a book that Glenn has not. At the end in that book, he has a whole bunch of exercises, and there is a specific exercise where you endeavor to not have that pause at the top and at the bottom of the breath, to keep it fluid all
Wow.
the time, in, moving into out, moving into in.
Hmm.
Yeah, something very, very
Yeah,
mindful.
maybe there's a planet where there are only two seasons then, and
It's in and out.
one
Called
continuous. Yeah,
California. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. And yeah, the breath is something else. I mean, that's, if you're always aware of your breath, you're always present, right? I mean, you can't you can't not be present if you're mindful of your breath. But I lose track of that thing all the time.
Yeah.
Get excited chatting about stuff with you folks, and it's just like breathless, right? You're like out of breath because it's just like so exciting, and it's like, oh yeah, breathe. But yeah, it's one of those things that's always with you. And interesting, it straddles the line between the automatic and the manual, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like one of those processes that your body will just do automatically, but you can also take charge of it and do it mindfully. Unlike your heart beating or your stomach enzymes digesting stuff, like you have no control over that, right? That's a completely automated process in your body. But there are certain processes like thoughts, like breathing, that they're automated, but you can actually get involved with them and you can actually do something about it. Like your thoughts can come up automatically, but you can also choose your thoughts. You can also choose to have no thoughts if practice and know how to meditate a little bit. So it's fascinating because that's sort of that middle ground where it's like semi-automatic, if you will. Like that's where you can really make a lot of progress, because that's where you can gain more and more involvement. And yeah, so it's interesting that all the spiritual practices have some reference to breath work, fasting. Like there's certain practices that you see come up everywhere, and it's like, again, eating is automated for us in a lot of ways. I just did a 3-day fast, and it was like I wasn't hungry, but my mind kept obsessing about food. You know what I mean? And it's like it's automatic. It's just like eat, eat, eat. And so you can get in there and exercise some willpower in that area. That just gives you even more power over the rest of your life, So yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
I'm just going to jump in, and I think our listeners, viewers already know this, but when Lassie said she had returned to hot yoga for first time in a couple of years because she wasn't able to go, it was not because of her anger issues. It was something else. Okay.
Is that something that you folks have talked about on this podcast at all? Is that a conversation you've had or would be willing to have? It's probably too late to start it now because it's a whole other podcast in and of itself, but just curious to know, like, are you public about that?
We've been
But what, Ollie? No.
Well, if I say it, then it's going to be public. Yeah. Over the last 2 years, there was this thing that was happening, and some people didn't do the thing that they were supposed to do. And as a result, they couldn't go to hot yoga for a couple of years. Yeah. No, I'm just curious to know if that's a topic that you've broached on your podcast.
It has come up. Yeah. For those who are, this is your first podcast that you're listening to, your first episode, we're talking about the vaccine passports in BC that were mandated that are no longer mandated. So it has come up in conversation. Vaccination has come up in conversation. It hasn't been the central focus of any conversation, but it definitely has come up. The trucker convoy has come up, our government decisions and all that kind of stuff, things that we've talked about during our Sunday, conversations in your home have come up. So yeah, we have, and it's been really interesting to hear, people's views, observations, how they've navigated, the situations. It's been really interesting for me to talk to people from my community down south of the Canada-US border, and what they have experienced, California, Florida, Pennsylvania, New York, different stuff all over the place. And so yeah, I have to say, it just right now here in BC feels like there is, for me, just like an opening, a relaxation, a sense of relief, because for 2 years, just a lot of up and down with how I was feeling and what I was thinking and what I was questioning. And really, I think for me, it just boiled down to the sort of, for 2 years, it was almost like questioning wasn't allowed. And that if you even asked a question or questioned something, then automatically there was a certain part of the population that would slot you into, a box with labels of things like fringe minority or,
Unacceptable views.
And so,
Racist misogynists,
yeah. And so for
according
me,
to our prime minister.
you know, to not be able to question in Canada, where, you know, like this is the land, I don't, it is like such a huge conversation and a Pandora's box, you know,
Mhm.
to sort of open up as we near
Yeah.
the end of
Yeah.
our
No, and we
episode
don't have to
together.
get into it now. I just was curious if it was something that you had publicly spoken about, or again, having a podcast, you know, you'd imagine that would come up in conversation with people, and just curious to know if you were open and transparent, or if it was something that you kind of tried to keep
No, I
away
mean, there were
from.
some guests who didn't want to talk about it. And
Yep.
so that's, you know, we wouldn't broach it. But if it came up naturally and people were willing, then yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we did.
There's something about this situation that you know, again, like, so I don't know how to even start this, but there's people in the past, lots of people, I'm sure, but like there's a couple famous instances historically, and maybe mythologically, if you will, of people who were willing to die for what they believed in. You know what I mean? And that's, I think, to me, that's hyperbolic. Like the example that I always use is Socrates, right? I don't know if you're familiar with his story, but you know, he was put on trial for corrupting the youth and blasphemy, and clearly he had done none of those things. All he did actually was go around asking people questions, Lasia, and exposing people's ignorance just by asking questions, not by telling them that they're wrong. So anyways, he got put on trial, and at the end of the trial, you know, they said to him, listen, you know, we'll let you off the hook. Just confess to these crimes. You can live. You can go live out the rest of your days in peace, in exile or whatever. And he was like, no, I'll drink the hemlock. And he literally drank poison. He preferred death to betraying himself, right? And what he believed in and what he felt was true, good, and beautiful. Jesus is another example. He was given an out, took the cross, right? So there's these hyperbolic examples of what I call drinking the hemlock, where it's like you'll go out on your shield, you're willing to risk death or personal harm in order to stand up for what you believe in. That's drinking the hemlock. And the last 2 years have provided many people with opportunities to do just that. Your job or the vax, right? That's an example of drinking the hemlock. Man, you need your livelihood. You pay the bills, keep the roof over your head, right? Your family or the vax, right? These are all opportunities. And so many people that I talked to, they didn't drink the hemlock, and now they feel terrible about it. And I had a guy the other day, I was at a kid's birthday party, don't know any of the parents. I'm sitting there with a book. 3 other dads are sitting around me. Next thing you know, conversation starts, start talking about COVID, start talking about this stuff. One guy goes, I'm vaccinated, but, and then you hear that all the time now in conversations. People have to qualify that they are vaccinated before they say what they want to say, because they're afraid, like you were saying earlier, that they're going to be qualified or labeled a certain way. So they feel like they have to come right out and say, I'm triple vaxxed. But, and then they start talking about what they see as like, doesn't make any sense. The vaccines doesn't seem to be helping, seems silly, blah, blah, blah. But anyways, at the end of the conversation, one of the dads was like, congratulations for not getting it. He was like, I waited to the last minute, and then it was my job or the vax, and I went and I got it. And he was like, kudos to you for resisting all the way to the end. And it's like, I was lucky. I didn't have to choose between my job and the vax. I was lucky in so many ways. I'm so grateful that I was in a position where I didn't have to take it, where I wasn't forced to take it. I mean, sure, I was being pressured by society, coerced, couldn't go out, couldn't do this, couldn't do that. But that stuff to me, no effect. Like I'm a hermit. I'll just stay at home. So, but I felt blessed. But this guy, again, was like, I wish I hadn't taken it. And it's like, wow, how many people are out there that went and got it just because they were pressured into it, because their family told them to do it and they didn't want to risk angering their family or whatever. And it's like, you know, having that inner sort of sense of self and knowing, you know, like this is what I believe in and this is what I feel, and I'm not going to concede on this. Having the ability to do that is a blessing. And I'm just so grateful that I have that, because yeah, so many people that I know just, they were put in positions and they succumbed. Right. And it's like, no judgment. It's again, I might have done the same thing if my job was on the line. I have 3 kids, I have a house, I have all these things that I need to pay. But yeah, anyways, just, it's interesting that so many people had the opportunity to really see where they stand, right? And I think that the last 2 years, I think that in a way it's a blessing in disguise, because it helps people to see like what they're willing to do and not do, right?
Yeah, I mean, it has been so interesting, and like you, Ollie, I mean, there I ended up not having to make that choice.
Yeah.
And even when you say that, I mean, like, we know lots of people who have been vaccinated. We know lots of people who haven't. We know lots of people who
Ditto.
have chosen to get a shot where it's, only one, not the two. Some are like boosted up all the way.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, for me, it has never been about, get it or don't get it. There are opinions that I have about, the actual contents and the effectiveness. Yes. But for me, it's always been a personal choice.
Yeah.
And if that is something that works for you and you feel good about it, that's your choice and that's up to you to do it. I've, never sort of understood the idea of, in order for your vaccine to work better, I got to take mine. Which, even that probably comes across, for some people as judgy, but for me, it just doesn't make sense.
No, it's not a judgment. It's an observation.
So, so that, but it also, we know people who really, really, really didn't want to take it, like really didn't want to do it. But for them, it did come down to, well, either you do, or you can no longer have your job. And so there were people that, took it begrudgingly and are still sort of like, oh, I wish I hadn't to, I was forced, and sort of thing. And then there are other people who ended up making that choice right, and get right with that choice. And just like, it's like, okay, yes, I would rather not. However, I'm doing it for my family. I'm doing it for the good of our family. I'm doing it because this, and then feeling solid with that choice, not feeling like they were forced into it or coerced, but that ultimately they made the choice for themselves based on things that they believed were of value and meaningful for them. And that, I think, like, as far as I can go with this, is for me where I don't even know what word to use, the gift, the blessing, the opportunity, I guess, was where there is still, even though there is this relaxation now and sort of, this more being open and more questioning sort of being allowed, in air quotation marks, for those of you who are listening, that we're always, always, always choosing how we respond. And, we can always stay stuck in blaming others and, that the government did this and Bonnie Henry made me do this and that kind of thing. Or, we can be like, okay, yeah, those were the options that I had at the time, and I chose to do this, because that, to me, then is a choice of empowerment rather than a choice from being a victim. Totally. And, but again, like I am where I am, and I have made my choices, and I have driven people to a clinic to get it done. Even though, I don't agree with, the actual thing, but it just
personal choice, right?
It's a personal choice.
Yeah. I completely agree. Yeah, and like you, I know many people on both sides of it. Like, both sides. We're all on the same side. That's the key. Right. But you know what I mean? Vaccinated, unvaccinated, people who got it because they didn't want to, but they had to, or they felt they had to. A lot of the times, it's like, well, I want to be able to go to the sports game, and I want to be able to go to the restaurant. And again, I'm blessed. I'm not into any of those things. So it was easy for me to say no, because it's like, I don't get to go to a restaurant, and just order in, or, whatever. Right. Like,
for me, that's kind of when it got a little like, and I mean, we even had this conversation with my mom when she was here over Christmas, and Glenn was, like, very graciously pointed out, you got to do all those things before.
We come from such a place of privilege.
Because you got this, you were totally able to do all of these things before this whole thing came into play. And that's the point. That is the point, that if we if we allow and sort of say that this is okay, that this is
Mm.
happening right now, that we're setting a precedent
Yep.
moving forward.
Yep.
And so that was where for me I started to really feel uncomfortable and
Yep.
just like this is not what I want my experience, what I want my life to be like. This is not the Canada that I want to live in. And
Yeah.
so we did go to rallies. We did speak up. I got in trouble from my spiritual community from speaking up.
Yep.
And there were a lot of tears and just,
Yeah.
feeling isolated and banished and alone and whatever. And yeah, but always knowing, even during those times, Ollie, that this was an opportunity for growth.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
healing and expansion and exploration into something else, which is not to dismiss that community, because I am still connected to that community.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people in that community I absolutely love and adore and I'm so grateful for. And even though we have gone over the 10:30 mark, I feel like this could be a good segue into just a little bit about the Center of Love, which
Yeah.
is this
Yeah.
new spiritual community that is being birthed into being, that you are an integral founding member of. And so I would just, I'm a part of it too, but I would love for you, because you were one of the sort of like the three initial people, you and Cressa and Candace,
Yep.
to, I don't know, come up with this. What would you like to tell everyone about it?
Oh boy. Yeah. Well, it's not, again, like I was called to do this. It wasn't certain. It's still at this moment in time, I'm still going like, really, this is really what you want me to do? Okay, fine. Yeah. I mean, I think it came from obviously the division. That was a big part of it. I think, I was contemplating like, what can we do to help people see that we're all on the same side, right? Because it was, especially during the COVID pandemic, there was this like vaccinated, unvaxxed, right? You're either this or you're that.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, to me, it was like just another variation of the old divisions that have been used against us, or that have been maybe not used against us, because that implies that there's some like, evil overlord trying to do this to us. But the divisions that have been sown either directly or indirectly between gender, race, sexual orientation. And then it was like, those things aren't working anymore. So now we got to find a new way to drive a wedge between people. So it's like vaccinated and unvaccinated. And, part of my realization in 2013, or not part of it, probably the essence of it, is that we're all one, not just human beings, the entire universe, the whole enchilada, as I like to say. But in particular, that experience for me was really about the human level of experience, and how there's really just one self acting out through many different forms. And when I really started to intellectualize it and break it down, I realized that we all are essentially the same. We all need the same things. We all want the same things. We just go about it in different ways. And that's where we think we're so different, right? We all want love, comfort, safety. We all want to be happy. We want to have meaningful lives. Nobody's going through life going, I want to have a terrible life. That's my goal. And if they do, then by their standards, a terrible life is actually a good life, because that's what they want, right? Mm-hmm. So they're pursuing whatever they want. So, I just thought, like, how can we boil it down to like the essential? Like, how can we get it to the place where everybody's standing on the same kind of foundation? Like, we all agree on some basic things, right? Like, nobody's going to tell you they want to have a bad life. Nobody's going to tell you that, that they want to struggle, that they want to suffer. Like, we're all after the same thing. So how can we get together and pursue those things together? And then, of course, the loving piece is because, well, what brings people together? What's the attractive force of the universe? Like, we can talk about fear and love. We can talk about, gravity and dark energy in terms of physics, like dark energy's pushing everything apart and expanding the universe, and gravity's pulling things together and attracting them. It just seemed like love was and is really the solution, right? Mm-hmm. To the division, to the fear, to everything that's happening right now. And this is old news. It's not like I came up with this idea. It's like, no, this has been reading and studying and practicing this for the last, however many years. and so it just kind of came to a head. And then, yeah, I started to get some pretty clear messages that it's like, okay, start looking for some other people now, because it's time. Now's the time, Lasia. Now's the time. It's never been a better time than now, for uniting people and coming together and sowing love, because that's basically what it comes down to, is just putting out the positivity and the goodness. And instead of trying to fight the bad, just support the good, cultivate the good, and the rest will take care of itself, I hope.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. And so I'm super excited and enthused about this. Because it also for me so far has been much more engaging than some of the other experiences that I've had, where it's been a more traditional model, if you will, with a spiritual director or leader sort of at the front of the room, if you will, giving a talk, lecturing, teaching, that kind of thing. Here, everyone has something to bring to the table. Everyone has something to share, and it is about engaging, expansive conversation, and not just someone at the front of the room, but a little bit of that, and then talking about it and questioning and just exploring together, which has been so exciting for me so far, because it honestly, it kind of reminds me of what it's like to be in class. And for me, I love being a teacher and facilitator. I also love being a student, because I just love the conversation, because the magic is the conversation. The conversation is what expands us and opens us up to different ideas and views and thoughts, and is part of what, pushes us out of our comfort zone as we continue to grow and be challenged and stretched and imagined, into new ways of being. So
everybody's a teacher, and in this community, there's no supreme ayatollah or anything like that. Everybody's a teacher, everybody's a student. There's no other way. I mean, when you embark on this path, when you start to have these experiences, you realize that your entire life, the entire universe is teaching you. Every experience that you have in your life is a potential lesson. And there's no difference there with the people that you meet. I mean, everybody has something to offer. I mean, I've already learned from you, and I can't wait to learn more, because you bring so much to the table, Lasia. I mean, the first time I met you, I was like, oh boy, this is going to be good. We're going to have a good time. Because we're on the same wavelength, but you're coming at it from a totally different perspective. I'm coming at it from like the Taoist, stoic, mystical perspective. You've got something totally different that I've never been exposed to. And so it's like, every time you open your mouth and speak, I'm like, yes. So this is, again, just more signs that nature approves, the universe approves. It's like, carry on, proceed, my friends. You're doing the right thing,
Well, it's like looking in a mirror. So it's just, like, I am you, you are me, we are one.
I can't wait to access your sphere, your area of the one, like you got some territory there that is unmapped in my world. So I can't wait to just, again, like, it's just more opportunities. And Glenn, again, you're a bit more, you're more of the strong silent type, but I know you've got lots. Just this conversation alone has shown me that you can't wait to, hopefully you will not just be a causal observer. I think you got to be a part of this, my friend. I want you in here. So again, anyways, really happy that we were able to do this, and that, again, that our lives have intersected, and that we're in this together. It's a great time to be alive.
Yeah, totally. So I know that the Center of Love is just sort of coming into being. We are having our first official gathering. Haven't even come up with what's the term we're going to call it, but like gathering, event, whatever, on Sunday, May 15th.
Yes.
And
correct.
I don't know what information to give out to people, because we don't have a website, we don't have a page, we don't have anything, but you can attend it via Zoom if you want to.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to send out the invite, the official invite this afternoon. I have about a couple hours blocked off to really dedicate some time to that. So, and that'll go to everybody, and then you pass it on to your friends or anyone that you think would be interested.
So on and so on and
exactly.
So on.
Yeah. And of course I have a limited capacity at my house, but Zoom has no limited capacity. So if you're willing to do it electronically, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, and we already do have people. I mean, we're all based, in and around Victoria, but there are some people up further island, Duncan, Nanaimo. There's someone from Kingston,
Ontario.
Ontario
Yeah.
already. So, it's a bit of a nationwide collective already. So, so yeah, looking forward to just expanding together in, many, 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 many ways. So, yeah. Okay, you know what? Let's move into the next segment of the show, just the quick super rapid fire question round.
Oh, there's another. Oh, okay. Nice.
This is where Glenn is going to take over. He's going to bombard you with
Oh, no.
questions for 1 minute, Ollie, that we want you to just answer spontaneously, top of mind, no critical thinking or contemplation or deep thought involved. It's just a fun way to get to know you better.
Oh, Lord.
And then when you're done, Glenn will tell you what you won.
Wow, this is awesome. I'm excited.
Okay. I am going to set my phone here. All right, honey bunch, let me know when you're ready and I'll start the clock.
Okay, and there is one cheeky one in here. So just see if you can spot it as you're answering as quickly as you can.
Okay,
oh, gosh.
Ready, set, go.
Okay, do you sing in the car?
No.
Okay, which do you prefer, reading to kids or watching movies with kids?
Watching movies.
Okay, cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Asking for help or going it alone?
Going it alone.
Fire or water?
Water.
Being invisible or being able to fly?
Oh, fly.
Okay, Gandalf or Yoda?
Yoda.
Man bun or Cinnabon?
Man bun.
Okay. Forgiving or forgetting? Forgiving or forgetting?
Forgiving.
Sweet or savory?
Savory.
Exercising the body or the mind?
Both.
Ooh. Spring or autumn?
Spring.
Okay, your child's art or their cooking?
Art.
Books or movies?
Books.
Jigsaw or crossword puzzle?
Jigsaw.
Ding, 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 ding.
Okay.
Every time you ask that question, I think of a jigsaw, not a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe the guest thinks that too. I don't know.
No. I was thinking like puzzle. We do that every winter. It's a tradition. We start doing 1,000-piece puzzles in the fall, and then we do it throughout winter. We have a table set up, and there's always a puzzle there throughout the whole time. So it's cool. Meditative. It's very meditative for me, anyways.
So the gift is from the book The Quest for Wholeness by Robert Brummett. A little story and then a quote. A story from India tells of two rival families of frogs, one green and one yellow, living in separate wells about 100 feet apart. At night, the frogs would sit on the edge of their respective wells, hurtling insults and threats to one another. Each considered the other an intractable enemy. One day, it was very hot, so a green frog swam unusually deep in search of cool water. He swam a long way in his quest. Upon returning to the surface, he found himself in the yellow frog's well. At that moment, he saw through the illusion of their perceived separateness. He returned to his own well to share the news of their essential similarity with the yellow frogs. And then in brackets, the story doesn't tell us how successful he was in convincing his compatriots.
I'm not surprised.
Okay.
I thought it was going to end with the frogs crucifying him for saying such blasphemy.
Well, let's go into the short quote from the little part about this might be, I forgot, the individuation is the chapter. This might be what Jesus meant when he referred to the kingdom of heaven. In the Gospel of Thomas is recorded, they said to him, "Shall we then, being children, enter the kingdom?" Jesus said to them, "When you make the two one, and when you make the inner as the outer, and the outer as the inner, and the above as the below, and when you make the male and the female into a single one, then you shall enter the kingdom."
Amen.
Woo!
My favorite gospel.
A little bit of Jesus, Joshua, for Christian friends. There you go.
That's the gospel of Zen Jesus, though. That doesn't count. Thomas is like, it's like, tell us these answers. He's like, no, I'm just going to be cryptic. Let you figure it out, guys. Love that.
That's good. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Honey Bunch, for co-steering the show and the ship as always. And thank you, Oliver/Ollie Belisle, for being our super special guest today. It has been such a treat, such an amazing conversation. I have 4 pages of notes to go through and just highlight and whatever. So thank you. This was fantastic. And I know that we could have many more on many, many, many topics. So I'm hoping that you might come back again one day.
100%. Hoping to have you in July as well on my podcast so we can run it a different way and expose you and your podcast to my little audience. And yeah,
right on.
Just keep it growing.
Okay, fantastic.
Awesome.
All right. Well, that's it for today. Thank you, everyone, for being part of our show experience, whether you watched, whether you listened live, whether you watched on the replay. If you're watching on the replay, then post in the comments below, #replay. Let us know what you thought. We are so grateful for you, for your time, for your presence. This has been an episode of Who Do You Think You Are? Look for another episode coming up soon in another week or two. That's it for now. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.